Tonight, from ancient times to the present, people claiming special powers have predicted similar events. Will their most frightful predictions of all soon come to pass? David McCallum is your guide to Ancient Prophecies 2. Countdown to Doomsday. Next.
The signs may surround us even now. Doomsday, Armageddon, visions of the end of time. Signs that prophesize the final chapter of future history. Those deciphering the secrets of the future, men like Malachi, Nostradamus, Casey, and before them the Greeks, the Hopi, the prophets of the Bible, the keepers of the Kabbalah, they all speak of a time that may soon come to pass. The end of history, the final judgment. From the beginning, mankind has feared that the future spared no mercy for those who enter blindly. That's why the ancient Greeks, seeking protection from an unknown future, relied on a specialized class of seers called oracles, who were routinely sought for advice on love, politics, even the outcome of wars. One of these oracles was unique, because visions of the future came not from the living, but rather from the dead.
Absolutely the most amazing and interesting oracle was the Oracle of the Dead at Ephora.
Student of Greek oracles, Dr. Raymond Moody.
This was an enormous underground institution that was in the far northwest corner of Greece. To the Greeks, the after-death realm was located underneath the earth. Not as we imagine today like our hell. It was just that that's where you went when you were dead. Most people would go into an underworld environment. And that was why the early oracles of the dead were constructed as subterranean facilities.
Those who sought to contact the dead descended from the world of light and life into a dark and foreboding cavern. Each downward step took the seeker closer toward a reunion with their past and a glimpse of their future. They were led through a vast and convoluted maze of hallways, twisting one way and winding another, ever deeper into the world of the dead.
They would lead you down a corridor and put you in a room, a dormitory in effect, where you would wait until it came your time to consult the oracle.
The wait was long and hard. It could last a month or more, and included sensory deprivation to prepare the seekers for a vision. Fed little, denied sound and sunlight, they found their minds wandering. Then, without notice, the summons would come.
When that time came, you were led out of your dormitory room into a 50-foot long subterranean hallway.
Stretching into the distance was the culmination of a long journey, a flickering path into the unknown. At the end were steps leading to a vast chamber, where the searcher finally met the oracles, high priests of the afterlife, all gathered around a giant bronze cauldron, the gateway to the other side.
They would highly polish this cauldron, which was made out of metal, fill it up with water, and that would make an optical clear depth. Indirect lighting from the flames of lamps would create really quite a spectacular appearance, and it was in that optical depth that people would actually seem to see their departed relatives and friends right in front of them. Full color, 3 dimensions, moving, full size, and even talking.
The dead relatives answered questions, great and small, allowing their descendants to know their destinies.
The Greeks were a lot more focused than we are today on divining the future. And that's one of the reasons why the oracles were so important. When they went to the Oracle of the Dead, by and large, they were going to learn from the spirits of the dead some sort of information. After they had been in the central apparition hallway and had seen the images of their departed loved ones, they were then led out, and they were led into a room where they were fumigated with sulfur. In the ancient Greek culture, it was regarded that if you had had any sort of contact with the dead, a dead body or with a spirit, you would have to cleanse yourself by immersing yourself in sulfur.
Their bodies were cleansed, but nothing could erase the visions forever etched in their minds. From dust to dust. Not much survives of the splendor that was ancient Greece. A few decaying ruins. But the secret of the oracle, the secrets seemingly revealed in glistening reflections, have endured throughout time. These reflections of the dead and the living never die. Ancient prophets sought protection from life's turbulent changes by invoking the supernatural in hopes of seeing and preparing for the future. Some accomplished this by gazing deeply into certain reflections, much as crystal ball gazers do today.
One of the standard forms of divination in ancient Rome was what's called haruspicy. By gazing at the liver, they felt they could predict what was going to happen in the future. This probably originated with mirror gazing in the sense that when you expose a dead organism and bring it out of the body, it has a certain sheen on it. These ancient diviners would achieve their visions by gazing into the surface of the liver as though it were a mirror.
Reflections also played a role in the lives of Native Americans, who sought insight into a universal question: how long would one live?
The Pawnee Indians had a ceremony in which they would take a badger, kill the badger, drain its blood into a bowl, and there in the moonlight, the children would come and gaze into the blood, which would of course act like a mirror, a reflective surface. Based upon the visions of themselves that they saw in the future, their parents would determine whether their life was to be a short one or a long one.
In Africa as well, mirror rituals have long been woven into the fabric of tribal life.
There was a tribal practice in Africa among the Nakomis, an initiation ceremony.
A young man is led to a ritual hut. Inside is a mirror positioned above a pile of human bones. The initiate gazes deeply into the reflection until an image appears in the mirror, the image of a dead tribe member. Afterwards, he must describe who he saw to the elders. If his vision was true, the man whose image appeared in the reflection was the very same ancestor whose bones lay beneath the mirror.
Then the young man would be accepted into full rights and responsibilities of manhood.
In Central Africa, among the Bassa tribe, reflections of the future may similarly be divined by a tribal shaman. Author Nouk Bassom has experienced this firsthand.
You see a movie unfolding. You see things that were, you see things as they are, and you see things as they will be.
You come to the old man asking questions and seeking answers.
I have an uncle who was a sorcerer. He always keeps a big basin of water under his bed.
Maybe the young man have woman trouble. Could be, huh?
So when you come, you say, okay, what do you want? He say, listen, my mother is sick, or my son is sick. What can I do to help him? He pull it out. He will put something in it immediately. You will see your own life, or the life of the person you are inquiring about, unfolding.
Look there, young man. In there, where the dead live and the future hides.
In America, over 100 years ago, the future revealed itself to a president through two haunting reflections.
Abraham Lincoln had a very striking mirror vision on the night of his first election in Springfield, Illinois in 1860. He was exhausted from the campaign. He collapsed onto a sofa. He looked up into a mirror that was mounted on the wall, and he saw not one but two images of himself, one vibrantly alive, the other pale as a ghost. And his wife interpreted this to mean that he would be elected to a second term but would die in office.
The 16th century man known as the king amongst prophets, Michel du Nostradamus, may also have captured reflections of future worlds. His astonishing legacy of prophecy includes what some believe to be predictions of Napoleon's bloody reign, the First and Second World Wars, Hitler's rise and fall, the assassination of John F. Kennedy, the Challenger disaster, and a third world war that will usher in Armageddon. Nostradamus may have discovered the end of time in a mirror. Author Dolores Cannon.
Nostradamus had a very special room in his house that he used exclusively for his prophecies. No one else was allowed into that room. It was cold and damp, dark, made entirely of stone. And there, on a large wooden table, he used various looking-in devices. He had the best results with a quite remarkable special black mirror. He called this his doorway to the future. And as he stared into this mirror, he would watch the scenes of the future played out in all their horror before his eyes. And he would go out of his body and travel into this mirror, just like Alice in Wonderland, going through the looking glass.
If Aboriginal or ancient peoples were able to use reflections to visit the future, might that technique still work today? Could raising the dead through glimmering apparitions bring aid and comfort to those living now? One man found the answer in a mirror. Dr. Raymond Moody has studied the connection between human perception and prophetic vision. He knows that crystal balls are not a magician's prop, but rather the vehicle for exploring a hidden world.
A high percentage of the normal population will, in fact, see visions of a certain kind when they gaze into an optical clear depth. It can be a crystal ball, can be a mirror, it can even simply be a lake or a pond or a body of clear water.
Dr. Moody, assisted by his wife Cheryl, has devised a way to scientifically monitor these visions. Following the model of the Greek oracles, he created a special chamber that promotes psychic imaging, a psychomantium.
I have a psychomantium that consists of a wall mirror mounted in a little room. The walls of the room are entirely covered with dark fabric to exclude light and reflections. The person sits in a comfortable chair just below the mirror so that looking up into the mirror, they do not see their own reflection. There's a light behind them which casts a diffuse illumination into this room. And when they look into the mirror, it seems that they are peering into an infinite depth.
People have really extraordinary experiences. I think if I hadn't been here to see them myself, I would have a hard time believing some of them. A doctor of medicine at Harvard had so many faces and images coming at her from the mirror. She said it was like folks lining up at a phone booth to talk. She got frustrated by it and actually stood up and said, enough. One gentleman that was here, who was at the time a sports producer for TBS, saw his dog. Now, people laugh at this, but you cannot imagine how many people have asked us, do our pets survive the afterlife? Could I see my pet? In looking through the clear depth, he saw his dog, and I think it was one of the most moving experiences he had ever had.
One incident showed the psychomantium to have unexpected powers.
When I looked up, here was this spirit, looked like an angel to me with this baby. And she was so emphatic. She kept saying, the baby's okay, the baby's okay. When I went downstairs after leaving the booth, I discovered that the woman before me had gone into the booth. She had had a reunion with her baby who had died. And the spirit was telling this woman, your baby's okay, your son is fine. I continued her vision.
By resurrecting the secrets of the ancient Greek oracles, a powerful new tool was added to the treatment of grief and mourning. But when others began experimenting with mirror gazing, the results proved ominous. Instead of viewing departed loved ones, the mirror gazers reported seeing an apocalyptic future world.
When I first went into the psychomantium, I picked up a lot of emotional hurt and pain and sadness and what felt like to me a lot of people's stuff that had been left behind. I could see a scene coming up, and it looked like a portal looking down into planet Earth. However, there was no trees, there was no houses, there was no buildings, there was no nothing. What I continued to see was atomic explosion after atomic explosion after atomic explosion. As I kept watching that, I saw on the right at the top, 2000. First, I wasn't sure what that was. I finally decided it had to be the year 2000. It stayed, and it stayed, and it stayed, and I saw many, many, many explosions.
Darlene's horrifying vision of global nuclear war had one ray of hope. A space station with cocoon-like pods sheltering and protecting the survivors.
I knew there were people inside, however, I couldn't see it. I could tell that the cocoons were breathing, that there was somebody alive in there, and I felt like they were all suspended in this inanimate state during the process of staying safe and protected and away from the planet when we needed to be away. I felt that I was one of the people in the cocoons and that there were lots of people in the cocoon, and the vision came to me as almost like a prediction or a feeling of what would happen.
Darlene is just one of many to foresee impending disaster. One after another, those who enter the psychomantium have been bombarded by images of death and destruction.
In the psychomantium, some of the earth changes that I have seen are just tremendous winds blowing things away that you can't imagine, even stronger than tornadoes and hurricanes, high waves, New York and coastline cities just breaking, the earth crumbling underneath from the water and the waves. These are all of the sort of the correlating signs that keep coming to me that say, yes, pay attention.
My experience in the psychomantium was not what I expected it to be. I wanted to go to have an apparitional experience to help me move through the grief of someone that I lost. That is not what happened. I had an out-of-body experience. I went through the mirror rather than sitting and gazing into the mirror. And I found myself on the other side, and I saw the planet. I saw the Earth.
Looking down from outer space, Jo Ellen London saw details of mass suffering. In one vivid scene, the victims were children.
It was a hospital-like setting. There were people there who were set up to work with whoever they brought in on the plane. It felt nuclear. That's what it looked like. There were masses of people everywhere. The children definitely were very much alone. Maybe they had just been separated from their parents. Maybe their parents sent them to get help so they could get what they needed. But they were alone. I saw one distinct spot in Florida, and It had a name. It's NAPA or NAPE. And I just saw it explode off the map.
Soon after visiting the Psychomantium, Jo Ellen received chilling news from an old friend that supported her visions.
She said that she felt like she needed to talk to me and she didn't know why. So I asked her how she was, where she was living, and she said, I live near Naples. Her husband had gotten a job at a nuclear plant. I was sick. Inside, I was just sick.
When Joy Thomas entered the Psychomantium, she encountered images of a bizarre domed city.
I think perhaps the only reason that I saw this dome city was to indicate that there was an energy source coming from underneath. Perhaps the earth changes, the violent earthquakes and the uprising of the land uncovered this source of energy.
Joy also saw a space laboratory, manned by scientists rushing to create desperately needed food.
There were people in the laboratory wearing lab coats, and they had test tubes full of a clear liquid with plants starting to germinate inside. I asked for a year for that particular vision that I saw, and the year 2021 came to mind.
Some apocalyptic visions are even closer at hand. Lydia Bow sees an earth of dark and deserted cities.
I asked what had happened that caused this, and it was an asteroid. I could see it hit the earth and cause a lot of destruction on the earth. There was a lot of grayness, just gray and dark. I asked also for some places where it would be safe for people to live at that time, around 2011. And I got that it would be in Western Canada, Northern Colorado, Chile, and part of Egypt. Those places will be safe. That'll be where people are living.
Now when people come out of the Oracle and they tell me that they can see the entire planet being destroyed in that way, I believe it, and I also feel very frustrated. We've got to do something. We've got to do something.
Although strangers to one another, they claim to have conjured fragments of a common vision inside the Psychomantium. Pieces of a catastrophic event looming in the very near future. Yet this is really nothing new. For centuries, prophets and seers have warned the 20th century may end with chaos and devastation. Nostradamus may be the most famous of seers, but over the eons, hundreds of lesser prophets have charted the future. And what is somewhat foreboding, many of their prophecies seem to target, to point to the end of our millennium. The year 2000. John Hogue, author of the Millennium Book of Prophecy, has documented some eerie visions of our near future.
There are many predictions that will be the countdown point for the final roller coaster ride out of this century into either thermonuclear war, ecological disaster, or an apocalypse. One comes from an ancient monastery called Marienthal. The monastery was built in the 13th century. Since that time, they kept a guest book. One of its earliest loggings is from some unknown monk who wrote down the following prophecy concerning the coming events of the 20th century. And he writes, "A war will come before which all previous wars will fade. Streams of fire will come from clouds where there are no clouds." This strange riddle could mean that the fire is from greenhouse gases, invisible clouds. Then he goes on to say, in the middle of a great body of water, which could either be the Atlantic, but it could also be the Pacific, all capital cities on both sides of the water will be burned and buried under rubble and ashes. In this war, he describes these future Armageddon warriors as people who live like moles that are underneath the ground 300 feet. We know that our missile guidance systems are actually set 300 feet under the earth, He predicted this centuries before it happened.
Many prophets seem to foretell the end of time with appallingly similar predictions. One warning of a looming apocalypse may herald from 17th century Scotland and the visions of a simple farm laborer.
There are many ways that people can see in the future. The Brahman seer used a small piece of polished meteor, and he used to look into it and see images of his clients and foretell their future. He foresaw the coming of trains and piped water and gas, and also the loosening of morals in the 20th century. He is noted for one prediction, which is either about a nuclear war or an ecological disaster. And in it, he says that deer and other wild animals shall be exterminated by a horrid black rain. We know that water mixed with nuclear fallout creates black rain, but water mixed with ash from volcanoes also creates black rain. So this could be a prophecy either of a nuclear war with nuclear winter following, or it is another of the many prophecies about a natural disaster befalling Northern Europe. He was noted for being a very blunt prophet, and it got him in trouble with the Countess of Seaforth, who had him tried as a warlock. As the crowd gathered around, she had him thrust into a burning barrel of tar laced with spikes.
Bran Seer is not alone in the suffering he endured because of his prophetic gift. Many times it seems that the visions of future worlds are paid for with blood.
In the 1930s, two peasant women named Maria and Elsa from northern Italy had a vision of the coming of a global Holocaust. They said it came from Christ, and when the vision came to them, they both suffered stigmata wounds on their palms and their feet, bleeding wounds like Christ on the cross. And they saw cities devastated by the rising of the Earth's oceans. Red rains, which could be radioactive rains, and also a reddened sky, which might even be a description of the pollution in many of our cities' skies.
Unlike these simple peasant women, whose prophecies came unannounced, some people received these warnings of annihilation after much seeking.
Pastor Bartholomeus Holzhauser was a 17th century preacher who was noted for his prophetic insights. He often prayed in seclusion, and his prophecies would come out of these experiences. He foresaw the coming of the French Revolution, which he said would take place around 1800 AD. He foresaw Hitler, called him a fierce ruler who would create great discord that would come from chaos, and from chaos he would return, devastate neighboring countries and conquer them. We know that Hitler came from the chaos of post-World War I Germany, and he certainly left the world in chaos when he died. He predicted the Cold War, as well as the coming of a Third World War or an ecological disaster. One of the aspects of that disaster is something he calls swords, fashioned of a different kind, that cut up the sky.
To a man who lived when candles lit the night, doctors bled the sick, and horses powered industry, what specter of a technological future world could a 17th century pastor have possibly been shown?
What Bartholomeus then warns is that there is a pestilence that comes to the earth from this activity. And he may have been foreseeing the ozone holes, of which he says, a great lament will come over all humanity, and only a small batch will survive the tempest and the horror.
Is a higher power using men like Bartholomeus Holzhauser to show us a cataclysmic course of the future? Or can the source of these visions be something more sinister?
Many people believe that prophecy is a gift from God, but also many people you would call insane have a similar gift of prophecy. Adolf Hitler, for instance, if you study his works, makes a number of chillingly accurate predictions that would put him right up there with Edgar Cayce and other prophets. This man was a mass murderer. in the last 10,000 years 100 prophets that have proven themselves 75% accurate in predated predictions. They come from all corners of the world, all different times. You have biblical prophets, prophets like Nostradamus in the 16th century, prophets from America like Edgar Casey, who have all these different various people that seem to share a collective vision. You can see that there are two clear courses in our future, in our near future. And one is doomsday, destruction of man. The other breaks that pattern, that rut of misery that we call history. And we will maybe live as a race outside of history and therefore unpredictable.
Prophets and soothsayers claim to divine the future by seeing into it. Their prophecies or warnings may arrive through dreams, visions, spirits, or even by the grace of a most beautiful young woman. Prophets are not the only ones entrusted with prophecy. Sometimes it's given to the less gifted, the man in the street. It may come to him as a sign, an apparition, or just a voice with wings. And often, it bears a warning. As we approach the end of the 20th century, there's been a staggering increase in the number of sightings of the Blessed Virgin Mary. Japan, Yugoslavia, the Soviet Union, Garabandal, Spain, and Fatima, Portugal, where several small children claim to have seen an apparition who left them a terrifying prophecy. Why has this apparition appeared so often? And is her message that the end is near? Journalist Michael Brown, author of The Final Hour, has carefully chronicled the Visions of Mary phenomenon.
The Blessed Virgin Mary has been appearing or manifesting since the 1st century AD. And there have been times when we see peaks in her appearances. Right now, we're going through the greatest peak that I'm aware of. Where she has appeared, dramatic events seem to occur afterwards.
One of the most amazing events in recent history occurred in Zaytun, Egypt, where the Blessed Virgin Mary appeared to more than 500,000 people from 1968 to 1970 atop St. Mary's Coptic Orthodox Church. It began one night when a witness to the vision pointed at what he believed was a young woman about to commit suicide. Archdeacon